What if being a millionaire was just one pill away? What would you do with $1,000,000? As the film begins, our protagonist, Eddie Mora, looms over the edge of a high-rise building. As he prepares to take his life, we're left wondering, where did things go wrong? A few months ago, Eddie was unrecognizable. You may think he's homeless, but no, he's just a writer. Don't worry, that's not too far off. He lives in a rundown apartment and spends his free time hitting up bars and running his mouth about his awesome book. Though, try as he might, he's yet to commit a single word to paper. Things ain't looking so good for Eddie. His girlfriend Lindy dumps him, and can you really blame her? She's successful, gorgeous, and tired of his shenanigans. He begs her to stay, damn near proposing on the spot, but she reminds him how that turned out for him last time. Oof, that's right, Eddie's even got a failed marriage on the books. Her name was Melissa. One day, Eddie runs into his ex-brother-in-law, Fern, on the street. He comments on Eddie's less than stellar attire, and I must say, Fern's looking pretty sharp. He must still be dealing, Eddie reasons. Fern states otherwise, and the two grab a drink before catching up on things. He asks how Eddie's doing, and Eddie gives a refreshingly honest take. Life sucks, he's losing sleep over his book, and somehow, he hasn't even started it yet.
Creative problems, huh?
Indeed. Fortunately, Fern has just a solution. You see, he works in the pharmacy field now, and he's got access to a new, FDA-approved drug that's yet to hit the market. He tosses Eddie a freebie, and though hesitant, he ultimately accepts the gift. Unfortunately, Fern gets an upsetting business call and has to skedaddle. He leaves Eddie with his business card. Right after, Eddie heads home and decides, screw it, let's pop this bad boy. On his way up the stairs, he runs into the landlord's venomous young wife. Eddie's way overdue on rent, so she digs into his case. During her verbal onslaught, the pill kicks in. We're treated to an interesting visual display as Eddie's vision distorts, brightens, and saturates. Eddie interrupts the woman, asking her what's got her so bothered. I mean, clearly she doesn't like him, but that isn't it. He surmises that law school's got her stressing. Wait, how does he know that? Well, he just noticed the corner of her law book sticking out of her back. Empowered by the pill, Eddie was able to dig through the recesses of his mind and recall a memory in which he saw the book in a girl's dorm. Whoa, I can't even remember my last meal. Eddie proceeds to flex his big brain as his subconscious bubbles up a stream of useful information. The odd museum fact, documentary he saw, class he was half awake in, it all combines into a delicious stew of brilliance. She never stood a chance. They head back to her room so he can help her with her paper. No, really, they actually got a lot done. Even though she got the D, her paper got an A. Afterwards, a newly motivated Eddie cleans up his apartment and finally tackles his book. The words flow out of him like a running stream, and by the time the day is over, he's got 90 pages done. Sadly, all good things come to an end. He wakens the next day, and upon probing his brain for a spark of brilliance, the old Eddie greets him instead. Though, all is not lost. The work he put in yesterday is still here. He visits his publisher, who's shocked to see he's actually written something. He insists she reads just 3 pages, and if she's not hooked, she can trash it. Later on, Eddie returns home to the greeting of several messages. I read the first few pages, call me back. Whoa, I just spent my lunch break reading, I'm 40 pages in, I can't stop. Huh, reminds me of my YouTube comments. Thanks, by the way. Eddie's thrilled, but it quickly dawns on him that without those pills, this dream comes to an end. He fetches Vern's business card and heads to his place. Vern's hesitant to open the door, but with his dream on the line, Eddie persists. Damn, they banged my boy up pretty good. It quickly dawns on Eddie that Vern's probably mixed up in something less than legal.
Doesn't sound very FDA approved.
Ha, sure it is. Vern reveals that it's called NZT, and yeah, it ain't exactly aspirin. Despite the sobering news, Eddie still wants more. Alright, just get my dry cleaning and some breakfast, Vern says. The more than willing Eddie accepts his new role as errand boy. He returns with jacket and munchies in hand, but finds that the apartment has been ransacked. Fortunately, Vern is fine. He's just resting, permanently. Oh god, they're probably still here. Eddie arms himself and waits. Hey! Seems they've left. Eddie calls the cops, but then quickly realizes that whomever was here was probably looking for those pills. Maybe they didn't find them. Eddie races against the clock, searching the apartment. Ooh, this is tiring. Wait a minute, maybe... Oh hell yeah, we hit the jackpot, baby. Right on cue, the cops knock on the door. Eddie's caught off guard, but manages to compose himself. He opens the door, and the cop nearly shoots him, but his white privilege kicks in. It's just a joke. Later at the police station, Eddie is questioned. Something doesn't sit right with the detective. A call comes in. It's Melissa, Vern's sister, and Eddie's ex-wife. The phone is passed along to Eddie. He'd like to meet with her, but she declines, not even wanting to see him at the funeral. Strange. Eddie returns home, pops a pill, then begins an awe-inspiring speedrun of turning your life around. He gets a snazzy haircut, learns piano, works out, and finishes book in just 4 days. And that's just the beginning. Math becomes useful, French becomes easy, and so do the ladies. Suddenly, he knows everything about everything. He ends up catching the eye of an investor, Kevin, at a party after an eloquent breakdown of stocks.
Very interested in working with you.
Eddie's extravagant lifestyle continues. It really does pay to have rich friends. One day, it dawns on Eddie that he could be doing something big, and whatever that thing is, it's gonna take some capital. No worries, let's game the stock market. Using the last of Vern's money, Eddie makes $2,000 in a day, then doubles it. Pretty good for a newbie. But if he wants to make real money, he's gonna have to up the stakes. Unfortunately, a bank isn't going to loan a large sum of money to Eddie, a man who just a few weeks ago was basically a bum. Instead, he turns to the services of a sketchy Russian loan shark, Gennady. For a genius, this is a pretty stupid move. Nonetheless, they close the deal, and Eddie now has $100,000 to play with. With the help of Kevin, Eddie lands himself amongst the big boys, and after upping his dose, ranks above them all. His jaw-dropping stock performance leads to crowds, who watch him sit at a computer. I guess that's popular these days. After just a week, his portfolio is home to a cool $2 million. Word soon spreads, and Eddie gets a delightful message from Kevin. Carl Van Loom, the head of the firm, wants to meet with him. To celebrate the wonderful news, Eddie meets up with Lindy. This is her first time seeing him since she dumped him. Eddie got that glow up. They dine at an Italian restaurant, and Eddie orders in the waitress's native tongue. Lindy is intimidated, to say the least. Things quickly pick up again between the pair. Sometime later, Eddie makes the front page of the newspaper for his mythical stock performance. That's great, but who the hell is that? Probably nothing. Let's go home. A paranoid Eddie keeps watch while Lindy calls him to bed, reminding him that he's got his big meeting tomorrow. On his way over, Eddie stumbles before finding himself seemingly teleported to the hallway. Lindy asks if he's okay, then heads out. The next day, Eddie casually prepares to have his meeting while a nervous Kevin preps him. He warns him that Carl likes straightforward answers, no BS. Carl arrives, they shake hands, and he asks, "What's your secret?"
Medication.
Technically, he's telling the truth. Eddie proceeds to divulge his methods to Carl and his associate, Pierce. He came to learn that the true driving factor of stock prices was human psychology. In other words, how people felt about the stock. As a result, he devised a series of algorithms to identify these patterns.
Delusions of grandeur.
I have an actual recipe for grandeur.
Carl gives Eddie a ride home, and along the way, has him review some company files. Reading between the lines, Eddie picks up on the impending merger between Van Loom and Atwood, a quickly rising competitor. Suspecting insider knowledge, Carl questions Eddie.
You're an amazing con artist, so you're a very smart young man.
He's rather impressed and decides to give him a shot. They're going to meet tomorrow to further discuss the merger. A triumphant Eddie steps out of the car, and instead of going home, decides to go for a reflective walk. Suddenly, time skips again. Eddie can't remember the last 20 blocks, and things get even worse when he tries to turn back. Before he knows it, Eddie goes on an absolute bender, hitting up clubs, parties, girls. We see the man from earlier stalking him, though we cut to later. Eddie gets into a fight at the subway station and calls upon his extensive library of Bruce Lee movies and self-defense videos. Nice. The next morning, Eddie finally comes to and realizes he can't account for the last 18 hours of his life. Maybe it's time to lay off the pills. He stumbles home and then goes over Van Loom's files, this time without NCT.
They were hieroglyphs.
Though ill-prepared, Eddie heads to the meeting anyway. He's completely and utterly hopeless, hardly able to answer Carl's questions. Carl talks about his competitor and potential merging partner, Henry Atwood, a man who mysteriously went from nobody to nipping at his heels in just 2 years. Eddie can't help but be drawn towards the TV, where he sees that a woman's been murdered. Wait a minute, she looks familiar. He excuses himself from the meeting and vomits before heading home. Upon arrival, Melissa calls in, worried about him. She tells him not to take anything Vern might have been giving him. A little late for that. He urges to meet with her, but she's reluctant. He pleads with her, and then we cut to Eddie searching for Vern's little black book. Within it contains other NZT customers. Eddie sits at a park bench while he calls them all up one by one. To his dismay, every number leads to the same conclusion. The person is either dead or dying. He gets to the last number, and a phone behind him rings. It's the man that's been haunting him.
Hello?
That's awkward. Realizing his impending doom, Eddie books it, and the man follows suit. A couple traffic violations later, and Eddie manages to hop in a taxi. He heads over to the diner where he agreed to meet Melissa. Where is she? Oh wow, that's why she didn't want to meet. They get to talking, and Melissa shares that she too was an NZT user. The benefits were numerous, but she knew she couldn't maintain that level of mental focus forever. As she tapered off, side effects followed. Eddie returns home, but runs into Gennady, who's looking to get that loan money back. He motivates Eddie, and in the process, causes him to drop his pill. He notices and snatches it from him. "This looks like some good shit," he says, before throwing it back. Eddie heads to the bank and gets a bag full of cash while Gennady waits just outside.
I feel good, man.
Oh no. Eddie tries to head back home, but the withdrawal symptoms are reaching their peak. Unable to make it back, he stumbles into Lindy's office instead. With no other choice, he reveals to her the entirety of the situation. She agrees to pick up his pills, which he reveals have been hidden in her apartment. Lindy calls back having retrieved the pills, but notices that someone's been following her. Suddenly, the man exits the vehicle and closes in. Lindy runs off and then gets some help. Just kidding. She manages to hide near a park, and Eddie instructs her to take a pill. She doubts she'll be able to think her way through a knife, but she soon learns otherwise. The NZT hits, and it hits different. She assesses her surroundings and suddenly knows exactly what she needs to do. She runs into the ice rink, grabs a child, and uses her as a weapon. It's highly effective. Lindy returns to Eddie, gives him a pill, and then the pair book a hotel. After she leaves, Eddie notices Gennady waiting for him outside the window. He confronts the tenacious Russian, who wants more pills. Later, he gives him some, as a means to buy time before he can come up with a better solution. Eddie hires some security.
Don't wear the same color suit, this isn't the Matrix.
Then, he returns to the firm where he's put in charge of the merger. As long as he doesn't up his dose and takes care of himself, the NZT side effects are kept at bay. He later gets some suits made with hidden compartments for storing the pill, and then meets up with the chemist. He offers the man $2 million to reverse engineer NZT in 6 months. Hell, give him some pills, he can probably do it in 1. During a business lunch, Eddie spots a detective. He's not here about Vern, but rather, the woman who was murdered in the hotel. Eddie's been identified as a suspect by a witness. Time to lawyer up. Meet Morris Brandt. Fortunately, the hotel room was wiped clean, so no hard evidence ties Eddie to the scene. You like that rhyme? Back to business. A meeting takes place to finalize the merger. Eddie has taken the upper hand against Atwood, and things are looking good. Though, Atwood himself is looking pretty sickly. He even has to rely on a cane to walk. With the deal on the brink of closing, Eddie stands to make $40 million. Carl senses Eddie's intention to fly the nest, so he brings him back down to Earth.
You do not know what I know because you have not earned those powers.
Eddie returns back to his hotel, finding that it's been trashed. Time for an upgrade. He gets himself a super secure apartment. Basically, a castle with a hell of a view. Sometime later, Eddie walks with his bodyguards when he is confronted by Gennady, who's now accompanied by his own pair. Plus, he's rocking a dapper fit. He demands more pills and threatens Eddie over the hotel murder case.
Getting smarter.
The next day, Atwood never arrives to close the deal. His wife arrives in his stead and discreetly discloses that Atwood's been hospitalized. As she heads out, we spot that her driver is none other than Mr. Spooky Bad Guy. Eddie meets up with his lawyer, Brandt, as he prepares to undergo a lineup. Fortunately, Brandt manages to get as many handsome-looking white guys as possible. Well, that worked. The witness can't tell one from the other. Brandt hands back Eddie's jacket before complimenting it and asking if he had it custom made. Back at the firm, we learn that Atwood has fallen into a coma. Somehow, Carl gets the feeling that Eddie knows more than he's letting on. Before he can offer up a response, Eddie runs off to take another, much-needed dose of NZT. Oh crap. Eddie goes to tell Carl he needs to leave when the receptionist brings him a package. As Eddie starts opening it, Carl argues with Eddie about what he may or may not be hiding.
I know there's something you're hiding from me.
Eddie rushes home and watches the news. He sees Miss Atwood has taken a 180 on the merger, dismissing it as only a rumor. Brandt then appears. Wow, what a coincidence. He's Atwood's lawyer too. Eddie puts the pieces together. Suddenly, Eddie hears pounding at his door. He checks the cameras and finds his good old pal Gennady, along with his buddies, busting down his cameras. Eddie walks to his balcony and flirts with the edge, contemplating the coming end to his life. Though, the instinct to survive overpowers him, he scours his mind in search of where he could find just one pill. Oh yeah, Eddie frantically searches as the goons chip away at his reinforced door. Upon finding the pill, Gennady busts in. It'd be a real shame if... Oh, Gennady and his buddies tie Eddie up to a chair. We notice that one of them is half blind. They head off to crack Eddie's safe, while Gennady shoots up some NZT, straight to the bloodstream. He then shows Eddie his cool collection, though he doesn't appreciate it much. While Gennady's eyes are off him, Eddie manages to snatch a knife. Gennady leans in to further intimidate him, and Eddie seizes the moment. Attaboy. As our Russian friend bleeds out, Eddie embraces his inner vampire. Once again empowered by NZT, Eddie gets a bright idea. That makes this guy very angry, but Eddie's got one more trick up his sleeve. Now, this is quite the conundrum. He's blind, but trigger happy. The man sprays and prays while Eddie takes cover behind a piano, which he ultimately uses as a weapon. Somehow, this kills him. Now, we just have to get those pills back. Eddie heads to the hospital to find Atwood, but instead finds his corpse. Oh, look who's here. Now that his boss is dead, he's like a lost puppy. Eddie clues him into the fact that Atwood should be alive right now, but someone never completed their mission. The pair head back to Brandt's place, where Eddie is able to get his goods and the bad guy avenges his boss. That's right, Brandt wanted NZT all for himself. We cut to 12 months later. Eddie's got a fresh fade, and he's running for governor. Carl comes to visit him. Turns out, he's one of the campaign's biggest financial backers. Carl's recently got into the pharmacy business. In fact, The company he bought is the one behind NZT. That's right, he knows all about NZT now. He lets Eddie know that they shut down his lab this morning, but that's okay. Carl offers him a limitless supply in exchange for working together. In other words, Carl wants to pull Eddie's strings when he's governor and eventually president. Eddie agrees to discuss the details over lunch, but upon reaching Carl's car, declines.
What are you doing?
Turns out, Eddie's not even on NZT anymore. He tweaked it, worked out the bugs, then tapered off. His brain has been left permanently enhanced.
The van's gonna rear in that taxi. 60 feet to stop, he doesn't have room.
Yeah, he's still wicked smart. Eddie bids Carl farewell, then has dinner with Lindy. Right before the film ends, Eddie flexes his big brain one more time. Wow, I can't believe Eddie just told you guys to like and subscribe in Chinese. That's incredible. Thanks, Eddie.